Allocation of the transaction price. Yeah. Sir. If you can demonstrate that my performance obligation was only to do the activation and this is because I have earned that, then maybe you can record it. It's necessary because in the case of telecom, you more often than not you will end up concluding that your performance obligation was to provide telecom services. Yeah, but if you can readily demonstrate that, then maybe yes. I really doubt in the case of telecom, especially telecom, health club, education institutions. I really doubt. Yeah, because even in the case of an education institution, I can argue with you that I pay a one-time fee to the education institution, and it's all because they do a lot of formalities in the admission of the student. But that is not their performance obligation. The performance obligation is to teach the student, so that is the period over which they need to take it. Yeah. Okay, so quickly we'll move forward, sir. We'll take it over the lunchtime. We'll move forward now. Okay, we have two more steps to cover. We'll move forward quickly now. Allocation of the transaction price. Okay, allocation of the transaction price. Again, I'll go back to the simple example. There are three methods how a transaction price is needed to be allocated. So what are those three methods? Let's say my contract has software plus implementation plus maintenance. Okay, the total transaction price is $10 million. Now the question is, this $10 million of total transaction price, how it should be allocated here, here and here. There are three methods of it. The first method is known as usage of observable prices. Okay, usage of observable prices. Usage of observable prices, what it says is that if the entity sell all the three performance obligation on a standalone basis, okay, then what is the price at which they sell this on a standalone basis? Go and check those prices, and those are the observable prices. Okay, if an entity sells all the three units or all the three performance obligation on a standalone basis, then what is the price at which they sell this performance obligation? That is the usage of observable prices. So let's say that they went and checked the history. They went and checked the history and they came out with an answer that software I sell for 6 million separately, implementation I sell for 4 million separately, maintenance I sell for 3 million separately. These are the fair values or standalone selling prices of all the three elements. Okay? Now what will you do? Your revenue is going to be $10 million only. So in this ratio, you will divide $10 million on all the three elements. This is observable price. If observable price is not available, okay, it can be because of a variety of reasons. Because observable price, when you take out, it should really be a comparable observable price. And many times it doesn't happen. Like, let's say that you determine $6 million for software. Okay, $4 million for implementation. I will ask you a simple question that how are you so sure that your own observable price of a software is 6 million? You said that I have evaluated 10 past transactions where I have sold software on a standalone basis. From there I have taken this price. I will see what are those comparable transactions. Let's say this transaction is happening with a customer in America region. Those transactions were with a customer in Europe region. I will say that those are not comparable. You cannot use it. Okay, or I will see that the transaction from where you took the comparable price, there you have supplied some 200 copies of licenses, whereas here you are supplying 10 copies of licenses. Again, I will say it is not comparable. The deal is only not comparable. Because of a variety of reasons, it may happen that observable price might not be available. Okay, then the second method is adjusted market assessment approach. Adjusted market assessment approach is whether your competitors or whether other people in the market sell these three elements separately. If they sell these three elements separately, then take their prices. Okay, take their prices. Why it is known as adjusted market assessment is, they say that you can take market prices, but to that market prices, you can adjust those prices based on your economic condition. Let's say that you know that the other market participants are selling the same product, software at a 40% margin, but I sell it at a 30% margin. To that extent, you can take the market prices and make the adjustment. Okay, this is the adjusted market assessment approach. The last one is if if adjusted market assessment approach also cannot apply because of some limitation, then you will use cost plus margin approach. Determine the cost of all the three elements, apply the standard margin, that is cost plus margin approach, which will give you the standalone selling price. Okay, these are the three methods. Yeah. Go through this example. Check. The standalone selling price is coming as 1,85,000, 25,000 and 15,000. Yeah, but your total contract consideration is 2 lakh rupees. This is how the 2 lakh rupees will be recorded. You will take out the percentage of the relative selling prices, and that this ratio you will allocate to 2 lakh rupees. So what is your key takeaway from this example? Somebody was talking about discount also. Yeah, a very relevant concept. Somebody asked in the morning about discounts. So what is your key takeaway from this example? That individually you sell these three elements for 2,25,000 rupees, but because you bundled the deal, you gave a 25,000 rupees of discount to the customer. Yeah, and in this example, because there is no other pattern that on what element the discount was given, we assume that the discount was given across all the three elements, and we proportionately distributed the discount on all the three elements. That is what has happened. Now let's tweak this example. Check this. So here what they are trying to say is that I know the total transaction price of 2,50,000. Okay. Now as far as the standalone selling price is concerned, I know the standalone selling price of the hardware, I know the standalone selling price of implementation, I know the standalone selling price of maintenance, but somehow I don't know the standalone selling price of software. Okay. So here they allow you a residual methodology. You know the total arrangement consideration, you know the estimated selling price of hardware, services and maintenance services. Whatever is the balance left, you can allocate it to the software. If that is the scenario at all, this is known as a residual methodology. Discount, yes. Now see this example. This will give you further clarity for discounts. So what I am trying to say by way of this example, is you have given him an additional premium of 10,000 rupees, and this 10,000 rupees is only related to the professional services. So I am trying to establish the fact that when it is so directly relatable that this 10,000 rupees is only relatable to the professional services, then should I allocate this 10,000 rupees to all the components or all the performance obligations in the contract, or can I allocate this full 10,000 rupees to only professional services? And if it is really one-to-one correlatable the way it is here, then you can allocate this 10,000 rupees only to professional services.
But I will be able to do so only if I provide hardware and software in time.
Yes.
So it is linked.
I
cannot provide professional
Correct, correct.
Taking the entire 10,000 only to professional services may not be right.
See, in this example, what are they assuming? They are only assuming that professional services should be completed within a time.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Purpose is to have a deadline so that they can start operating on that.
Maybe yes, but if it is so directly relatable, the idea is just to explain you that if it is so directly relatable that on one particular element or because of one particular element you are earning the discount, you can provide the discount only to that element. Check this. Because here it is so clear that 10,000 rupees is only pertaining to professional services and timely completion of the professional services, full 10,000 rupees of discount you will allocate to professional services. One more example I want to give. Yes, you see this example. This will give you further clarity on discount allocation. Because discount allocation is not easy. When you give a discount on a composite deal, as a matter of first step, you should try and find out that whether this discount pertains to one particular element in the deal. If you say no, it doesn't, then you allocate the discount to all the elements. So check this example. Okay, so everyone went through this example? Yeah? Can I say that there is a discount of 200 rupees in this deal? Because on a standalone basis, 1700 plus 300 plus 300, 2300 rupees is the price at which they would have sold. But here they have only sold it for 2100. 200 rupees of discount is there. The only question is, this 200 rupees of discount, is there a direct correlation or a direct pattern whereby I can demonstrate that this 200 rupees of discount only pertains to television and speakers, or it pertains to all the units, television, speakers and entertainment unit? There is a clear pattern. One pattern is coming out very clearly. See, they sell very regularly television and speakers on a bundle basis, and they sell it for 1800 rupees. The standalone price of television and speakers is 1700 plus 300, 2000 rupees. So I can demonstrate that this 200 rupees of discount only pertains to television and speakers. And hence, in this case, when I am making a direct correlation between this, there is no need to allocate any discount to the last unit, which is entertainment unit. So as a matter of first step, any discount in a composite contract, you try and establish whether any direct correlation with any particular elements are there. If it is not there, then it is allocated to all the components. That is the underlying concept. See. Okay. Now coming to step 5, recording revenue. Now revenue is recorded as and when the performance obligation is satisfied. Okay, that is the underlying principle. Revenue is recorded as and when the performance obligation is satisfied. Performance obligation, now performance obligation, you know, earlier, I mean, either under AS9 or under IAS 18, there was a concept of, transfer of risk and reward, whereby if you are selling any goods, you will record revenue, then you will transfer the risk and reward of the goods, right? Now, here is the concept of transferring the performance obligation or transfer of control. You need to see that at what point of time you fulfill your performance obligation. And that is the point of time when you record revenue. Whether you are fulfilling the performance obligation at one given point of time or whether you are fulfilling the performance obligation over the period of time. If you are fulfilling the performance obligation at one given point of time, which generally might be the case in the case of sale of goods, then you will record revenue when sale has actually happened. But if you are fulfilling a performance obligation over the period of time, okay, then you will record revenue over the period of time. Now, what Ind AS 115 has done, they have given me 3 important indicators. Those to check when the control or performance obligation gets transferred over the period of time. If those 3 indicators are not fulfilled, then I assume that the performance obligation is fulfilled at one given point of time. Okay. So I'll come here. These are the 3 boxes in yellow. Okay. If any of the conditions are getting fulfilled, then the control is getting transferred over the period of time and revenue will be recorded over the period of time. Otherwise, it will be recorded at one given point of time. Let's go through these criteria one by one. And you know, I mean, how this is impacting. I mean, think of the plight of a software development entity or any development entity. In the case of a software development entity, you generally follow a percentage of completion model, and that percentage of completion model you keep on recording revenue until that point of time development is complete. Okay. Now, if you are doing a software development, these are the 3 indicators which you are going to check. If any indicator is fulfilled, then you are fulfilling the performance obligation over the period of time, which means POC is fine. If no, if the all the three indicators are not getting fulfilled, then your control is getting transferred at one point of time. Then you can only record revenue when you are completing the software development. That is the difference. So let's check the first indicator. The entity is creating or enhancing an asset that the customer controls, or it is created or enhanced. So whether the entity is creating or enhancing an asset that the customer is controlling. So in the case of software development, yes, you are creating an asset or enhancing an asset for the customer, but whether the customer is controlling it or whether you are controlling it. Customer is controlling it means it is completely happening on the specifications of the customer. Customer is directing all the activities, that this is the code how you need to develop, and this is the end result which I expect from you, and this is the way it has to be developed and everything. Whether the customer is entirely controlling it or you are controlling it, that development activity. More often than not, you would be controlling it. Okay, so it may happen that the criteria 1 is not fulfilled here. Then I come to criteria 2. The entity's performance does not create an asset with alternative use, and the entity has the right to payment for performance completed to date. The asset which I am creating for the customer, or the development work which I am doing for the customer, if it has got no other alternative use. So let's say that tomorrow the customer terminates the contract. Okay. When he has terminated the contract, I have to check two things. Whether I have any alternative use of this software which I was developing. Let's say he terminated the contract, and till that point of time only 40% of the software was completed. Okay. Whether I have any alternative use of the software or not, that is one thing which I am going to check. And second, most important, whether the customer has got the right to make me the payment till the date of termination. If the customer has got the right to make the payment or obligation to make the payment till the date of termination for that 40%, then the performance obligation is getting fulfilled over the period of time. This is a very good indicator and very important indicator. But if the customer has got no obligation to make the payment, and his obligation was only to make the payment right at the end of the term, then maybe the control is only transferring at the end at one point of time. And the last indicator, the customer is receiving and consuming the benefits of the entity's performance as the entity performs. This is generally applicable in the case of service contracts, like maintenance or 24/7 help desk, whereby as and when you perform the services, the customer obtains benefit of the services. There the performance obligation always gets fulfilled over the period of time. Yeah. So if any of these three criteria are fulfilled, then the control is getting transferred over the period of time, which means you can record revenue using using a POC method. Yeah, the percentage of completion method. Now, when I talk about percentage of completion, I'll spend 2 minutes. What are the different methods by which I can apply a percentage of completion? I mean, how do I determine percentage of completion? In all my examples till now we have seen, we have only determined cost divided by total cost. But what are the other methods to determine percentage of completion? Cost incurred is one of the methods. Other methods? Milestone is not a method of percentage completion. So, realizable value. Sorry? Technical estimate is yes. So if you are developing a software, or let's say you are developing a bridge or any complicated piece of machinery, at any point of time you can call a technical engineer or a technical expert, and he will study the whole construction activity and he can give a technical certificate that based on his evaluation 50% of the work is complete. That is one of the model of doing percentage of completion. Another very common model is your output method. Output method means, one of the very common output method, I will give an example. Let's say that you are constructing a road for the customer. The customer has said that you need to construct 20 kilometers of road for me. Then what happened? 31st March came, year end came. At year end you went and saw that you have already constructed 5 kilometers of road for him. Which means 5 divided by 20 is your direct output, which you can see that this much is the percentage of completion which I can visibly see. That is one of the most common output methods. You cannot apply this method to any contract, but where you can apply, this is one of the preferred methods, output method. Yes. So in that case, what happens that you determine the total contract revenue. The total contract revenue into 5 divided by 20, whatever percentage is coming is your contract revenue. You determine the total contract cost, and the same percentage you apply to total contract cost. Yeah. These are some of the, so when the control activity is getting fulfilled at one point of time, okay, at one point of time means you are transferring the control. Let's say you are selling the goods or something and your control activity is getting fulfilled at one point of time. These are some of the indicators which you check that can you record revenue or not. I mean, then you will check that whether you have the present right to payment, whether the legal title to the goods or whether the legal title to the goods have been transferred to the customer or not, whether the physical possession has been attained by the customer, whether the risk and reward is transferred to the customer. These are some of the indicators which you check just to ensure that what is the timing when you should record revenue, when control is being transferred at one point of time. So, by way of this example, we are trying to say that although a contract can be a composite contract, let's say a software plus a maintenance, okay, there also, if you determine that those two elements are two performance obligations, then when both the performance obligation will be fulfilled, then respective revenues will be recorded. When software will be delivered, then you record the software portion of the revenue, and when maintenance services are performed, then you record maintenance portion of the revenue. Okay. We'll come to this in the end. It's not very relevant in the Indian context. Breakage is simple. Yeah, warranties. So, very important, warranties. Now, today what happens? I mean, let's assume a scenario that an automobile company, I went and buy a Hyundai Verna, and as part of that, I get a 2-year warranty. What is the current accounting model under Indian GAAP which any company follows? Estimate the cost of the warranty. Yeah, that accounting model is going to change now. Okay, and now you really get into the warranty, and you need to see that as part of the warranty what the company is actually doing. Okay, and it might happen that this warranty may become a separate performance obligation. Okay, so for an automobile company also, the selling of the car and the warranty service may become a separate performance obligation, whereby warranty revenue will be recorded over the period of the warranty. For that, what we need to do is, we need to, we have made a small flowchart, okay, by way of which we'll try and determine that whether warranty should be accounted for separately or not. The first indicator says that whether the customer has an option to purchase the warranty separately, whether the same customer or any other customer, they have the option to purchase the warranty separately, or whether it happens that they only get the warranty when they buy the product from the company. If they have the option to purchase the warranty separately, okay, let's say a very common example. Maruti, as part, when they sell their car, they give you a 1-year warranty. Now, whether the customer has an option to take a 5-year warranty also, which means that he has an option to purchase 4 years of warranty from you or not. If yes, then for sure 4 years of warranty will become a separate performance obligation. For sure. Game done. Okay. Let's say that the customer does not have the option to purchase the warranty separately. Then you need to check that whether warranty, that by way of a warranty, whether you are providing any additional service in addition to the assurance. Okay, any additional, and here some judgment will be involved. Then you need to see whether it's an assurance level warranty or a service level warranty. If the customer does not have the option to purchase warranty separately, then you just need to see that whether your warranty is a service level warranty or whether your warranty is an assurance level warranty. If it's an assurance level warranty, continue to accrue costs. Continue to do whatever accounting you are doing currently, no change. But if it is a service level warranty, then you need to take it as a separate performance obligation. Okay, and whether it's an assurance level warranty or a service level warranty is slightly judgmental. You need to see the nature of the warranty, that whether you are just assuring that all the products will work perfectly fine, and in case something goes wrong, then you just take the car to the automobile manufacturer and he will fix the bug for you. Whether you are just giving that assurance or whether you are actually providing a whole lot of service during the warranty period.
No, but what is the difference in assurance and service?
Yeah, there is a thin line of judgment. In the case of, let me give you an example. A software. Let's say when I sell a software license, there I give a warranty. Okay. In those warranties, it's typically a assurance level warranty, because what happens when I deliver a software, after that a small bug can come in the software, which he can just sit in his own premises and he can maybe remove that bug. He's providing you the assurance that whatever codes I have written, okay, that code will function as it is, and a significant part of effort is even not expected on part of the software company to give any time during the warranty period. assurance, he has given an assurance and maybe small bugs or small fixtures can come, which he can do it from there only. But where the company has given a warranty which is such, whereby the company giving the warranty is expected to perform significant service, typically automobile. Okay, automobile is a very good example whereby anything happens with the car, let's say tomorrow the engine goes down or anything happens with the car which is wrong, he will actually spend 15 days or 20 days, 1 month of time and he will fix up that problem for you. Significant service can be expected during the warranty period. There it can become a service level warranty. That will become a separate performance obligation. You quickly check this example. This will give you, this will clarify. So they have given some indication in the example by way of which I can determine that this warranty is a separate performance obligation. Okay, because the example very clearly says that the entity normally provides only 1 year of guarantee. But in this example, they have given you a 5 year of warranty. Yeah, which means that this first bullet point or the first box, the customer have an option to purchase warranty separately or not is getting fulfilled. Yeah, because the customer has got the option to purchase the warranty separately, that is the reason he has got this 4 year of additional warranty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got it only. So the warranty for the year 2 to 5 will become a separate performance obligation for which separately the revenue will be recorded. And the warranty of 1 year, which is your normal performance obligation, you will continue to accrue cost for 1 year warranty. That 1 year warranty, year 1 warranty will not become a separate performance obligation. Okay? Okay, incremental cost. Now, there is some guidance given in India. Yes. Warranty and? See, free maintenance is as good as a warranty because the cost of the free maintenance you have already built in the price of the product and already recovered it. So if it's a standard warranty, it's if it's a standard free maintenance which you give as part of your contract, it's nothing but a typical warranty. Then you will have to see. So you will always have to see your standard period. I mean, if the standard period of warranty is 1 year and if a customer has taken the warranty of 2 years or 3 years, then it's a very good case of accounting warranty separately. And that's your standard practice. If that is your standard practice, then it will not become a separate performance obligation. Then it's just that your warranty is as good as it's not for a period of 1 year, but it's for 1.5 years. You will continue to accrue cost of the warranty. Scope is different. In free maintenance, you do much more. We'll have to evaluate. It can become a separate performance obligation. Yeah. More so I say this because then it's more a case of a service level warranty also. Then it's not a mere assurance, but it's a service which you are providing. It can become. Okay. Incremental cost I will cover separately. Incremental cost, in incremental cost it says that any cost which you have incurred in winning the contract or any cost which is there because the contract is there, otherwise the contract would not have been there. That is an incremental cost. That cost you can capitalize on day one and that cost you can amortize over the period of the contract. Okay, so let's say that you incurred some sales commission. Typically, you incurred some sales commission which you paid to an outside agent or whatever, which helped you in winning one contract. The only question is whether this commission can be capitalized or whether this commission is needed to be charged off in the P&L. So for that you will need to see whether the commission meets the definition of an incremental cost or not. If it meets the definition of an incremental cost, you can capitalize it, otherwise not. The definition of incremental cost says that cost that would not have been incurred if the contract would not have been obtained. Which means irrespective he wins the contract for you or not, you will have to pay something to him. That is not incremental. You only paid something to him because he won the contract for you is incremental. If something is incremental, you can capitalize the same in your balance sheet and amortize the same over the period of the contract. Okay? This is not an easy area, by the way, because contract costs or cost capitalization under Indian GAAP has been very difficult. Typically under Indian GAAP, how do you do a contract cost capitalization or incremental cost capitalization? Under Indian GAAP, you see whether the cost meets the definition of an intangible asset under AS 26 or not, and then only you can capitalize. And that cost generally doesn't meet the definition of an intangible asset. So under Indian GAAP, more often than not, you end up incurring or expensing these costs. Now explicit guidance is there where you can evaluate whether you can capitalize these costs or not. Okay? Now, this is about incremental cost. See this example, a good example. This will provide you clarity on what costs can be capitalized and what not. So again, the assumption is that if the sale contract or new contract would not have been signed, you wouldn't have paid any bonus to those employees. It's very well an incremental cost, right? But in the second scenario, you would have paid the bonus to them if you would have met the targets, right? So in the first scenario, if the commission of someone or if the bonus of someone is directly linked to the amount of sales which you make or new contracts which you win, and if those contracts are won, then it's a very good case of incremental cost. Then it's a typical incremental cost which you can capitalize. Contract fulfillment cost. Okay. Let's say that as part of the fulfilling the contract or as part of fulfilling your performance obligation, you incur certain costs for some future activities. Okay, if you incur certain costs for some future activities, those costs also you can capitalize. Those costs you can capitalize if it relates directly to the contract, if it generates or enhances resources that will be used to satisfy the performance obligation in the future. Okay, and if it is expected to be recovered, then you can even capitalize this. This is even the current practice, it's not going to change much, so I'll move forward. Okay, so now coming to the last important concept before we move into the disclosures. Check this example and I'll tell you the background, what is the change here. Check this example first. Now I'll tell you what is the question here, okay. The question is, now the question or the problem is, there is no question at all that how you are going to recognize that 0.05% of the revenue generated from the future sales. That is a typical royalty. And the way you account for royalty currently, whereby the future sale, whenever it will happen, then you will continue to accrue the royalty revenue, that will continue to happen. Okay? So 0.05% of the revenue which will come depending on the future sale, that you continue to record at a future point of time, no problem at all. The question is this 12,000 rupees, which you have received upfront. Now this 12,000 rupees, the question is, can you record this 12,000 rupees upfront or do you need to record it over the period of time? And why this question is coming? Because this is a typical case of a sale of intellectual property right or a sale of a software license. In the case of software license, what it says is that whenever you make a sale of a software license to other party, you need to evaluate one thing. You need to evaluate that whether you have provided the right to access the software to the other party or whether you have provided the right to use the software to the other party. Okay? And if you have provided the right to access the software to the other party, then this 12,000 rupees will be recorded over the period of the license. If you have provided the right to use the software to the other party, then this 12,000 rupees will be recorded upfront. Now, what is this? I will take an example and explain you. What is the right to access? In a number of companies, you would be having ESOP plans. Yeah? So, Rajendra, tell me, currently, do you maintain these ESOP plans in an Excel sheet? Let's say कि वो ESOP plan आपने grant date पे grant किया, then different dates पे वो vest होंगे, then after that different dates पे people will exercise those. All this data, do you maintain it in an Excel sheet currently? Sorry? Outsourced to whom? ESOP Direct. So ESOP Direct, you have taken a license from ESOP Direct. It's as good as a license from ESOP Direct. So let me tell you, typically ESOP software, or ESOP outsourcing, how it works is, you just go to an ESOP outsourcer. Let's say one of the very famous outsourcers is Equity Edge. He's there in the US. Okay, you can contact him also. What he will do is, he will say that, okay, I will do the entire ESOP bookkeeping for you. Okay, ESOP bookkeeping means entire books of account as far as your ESOP is concerned, I will maintain for you. And they maintain it in a beautiful manner. What they will do is they will maintain the entire record, employee-wise. As soon as any ESOP vests for the employee, an employee will receive an auto-generated mail that today 100 ESOPs have vested for you. As soon as an employee has exercised those ESOPs, automatically the number of total shares gets reduced in the system. Complete automation. Okay. What they do is, they don't sell anything to you. When they take when you take their license, They will take your records and they will maintain it there. You will just have an access to their records. Access means you will just have a login ID and a password where you can log in and see that how much is your entitlement, how much is your non-vested stock, how much you have exercised in the past. That's it. For that you will pay him 10 lakh rupees per year or $1 million per year. He will have complete right to make the changes to the base code of the software, and if the base code changes, you will see your change on your interface. He is doing everything. He has not given any right to you apart from right to see your records. Okay? Tomorrow if you tell him that this is not the way my record has to be maintained, you maintain it in this manner, he will say goodbye. Okay? This is a typical right to access, whereby you don't have any leeway. You just have an access to the end product. You cannot make any changes to the product to suit your requirements, and you have to live with what the other party has given. This is a typical right to access. Okay? Here you will record revenue over the period of time. If you have paid him this 12,000 rupees for such kind of software, you record it over the period of time. But if you have paid, but let's say that he has sold the license only to you. I mean, a typical Oracle or a SAP, what they do? They sell the license to you, and they say that now you go and implement it the way you want. My product is software license, I have sold it to you. Now you go and implement it. You implement 10 modules, 20 modules, you implement it in Hyderabad or in Masuri, I don't bother. Okay? You use my software the way you want to use. Okay? That is a typical right to use, and that is a product sale for them. There they can record revenue of 12,000 rupees on day one. So in any software sale or in any license sale, you need to see whether it's a right to access the IP or whether it's a right to use the IP. If it's a right to use the IP, it's a product sale. If it's a right to access the IP, it's not a product sale over the period of license. Okay? So that is what they're trying to explain. Presentation and disclosure. I mean, presentation and disclosure is all very theoretical. I request all the participants, maybe they can go through this presentation and disclosure. If at all any question, I mean, you can ask me. It's all theoretical. You can just go.